Welcome to the Happy Being Well podcast, where we talk about strategies and insights so you can live happy being well with your host, Rita Ferrugia. This podcast is presented by happybeingwell.com, your online store providing the best in all natural wellness products, such as natural essential oils, all natural bath products, all natural facial masks, all natural deodorants, irresistible leggings, crystals, including crystal home decor and kitchen items, herbal teas, natural sleep aids, and so much more natural wellness goodies at happybeingwell.com. Free shipping on any order within the USA at happybeingwell.com. Now enjoy the show.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Happy Being Well. We have another exciting guest today. We have Dahlia, and I hope I said that correctly because I kept saying it wrong initially. So she is in the holistic medical healing field, and we could all use some healing, and everyone's really opened up, today more than ever in regards to healing. So we have an awesome conversation around healing today with Dahlia. I always want to say Delilah for whatever reason. I think it's because that song,
Yes, I'm very familiar. It's okay.
It's just like totally imprinted in my mind. Yeah, so I'm really excited that you're here today to talk about healing. And so tell us, what is the significance of healing and what are the different ways of healing? And why is everyone more open to it today than ever before?
Absolutely. I could go in so many different directions with this, but, when it comes to healing in general, for me, I have transitioned out of the traditional healthcare model. And so for me, I came from the disease care, sick care. And as we continue to heal beyond that model, and when we start incorporating other modalities, this is where I think the concept of healing and even quantum healing, like when you bring in the energy, when you bring in the spirituality, when you bring in the non-traditional avenues for whole body, putting them all together, I think this is where healing comes from. And this is where it can happen so much quicker than it has happened in the past. So for example, I'm a big proponent of talk therapy. However, that can often take a really long time. And it can also be re-traumatizing for an individual to do and talk about the same thing over and over. But when we can enter in through the body while using some of those brain techniques as well, this is where true healing happens. And that's when we're putting a variety of different modalities together so that somebody can really be their optimal self, right? This is really learning how to master your own ability to tap into the wisdom of your body, because our bodies are meant and designed, engineered to heal when given the right support. And everybody is different. So it's not a one size fits all. It requires customization to really find people's full potential.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. So when you say in the body, what does that mean? I think is it a movement? Is it, some type of tapping? What kind of body healing release is that? Or is it unique to the certain individual in terms of the body movement or some kind of body technique for the release?
Yeah, that's a great question of how do you get that kind of release in the healing through the body? This really it requires going in, asking some really good questions, becoming curious about the person who and what they are wanting to feel, how they're wanting to be differently, because due to lifestyle, due to diet, due to overconsumption, chemical overload, our organs of our body, our kidney, our liver, our heart, our brain, our blood vessels can get quite congested. And so when I talk about the body, it's not just movement. Yes, I always look at the chakra system from a Reiki perspective when I'm working with clients, because emotions and past traumas and ancestral history, all of this gets in a way stored in those organs in your body. So how we move it through is through daily detoxification, through specific movements, depending on, for example, maybe past diagnoses or different anxieties that, each individual is wanting to overcome. Because what happens is sometimes people get tied to an old diagnosis or an old label, or even an ache or a pain or fatigue. I mean, all of this gets stored in the body, right? The brain it actually can process so much, but what the brain can't consciously take care of, that is where the body stores the rest of it. And it will present itself in fatigue, in sleep disturbances, in hormone imbalances, in a chronically high cortisol, which is a chronic state of stress. And so that then just creates a breakdown. And so tapping, yes, that is one. Breath work, energy work, movement medicine, all of this is really necessary. And when it can be targeted specifically for people's own genetic makeup and their own body and what they've gone through in their lifetime, that's where real profound healing can happen.
I love that. And so, so how do you identify what specifically is the, trauma? Especially if it's like a micro trauma, maybe the patient doesn't really know, or the client, I should say, doesn't really know what exactly is the trauma, maybe, or maybe they have an idea, maybe they do know, because there's so many traumas. We have so many traumas that can affect us since birth, or even one could say prior to birth.
Before. Yeah, absolutely. How do you identify what the trauma is? That's through questions, through intuition. I use my psychic abilities. I am a medical intuitive, and it is very easy for me when I am working with a client to tap into, based on their answers in specific questionnaires, but then what is coming up. It's always coming back to different core wounds if it is a trauma. And it can be micro trauma. It can be, compounding trauma, different kinds of things, but it's all coming from worthiness, attachment, really the sense of safety, which if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs is like the second level, like food, shelter, water, all of that gets taken care of. But safety is required in order to have even deeper healing, even more enlightenment, anything that we are wanting to create, if it's not anchored in safety. So a lot of how do you find it out is where do those fear stories come up? Where do those limiting beliefs come up? And this can be about their supplementation, about their body, about their body's ability to do X, Y, or Z. It often is coming from an old story or previous life trauma. All sorts of different things can influence how it comes out in our day to day. And so how we find that answer is the excavation process, which for me is really, really fun, because when we find and we get to those core wounds that are getting in people's way, this is where the magic really starts to happen. And they're just like, oh my gosh, I've been operating from this place for most of my life and had no idea. And then the real work actually begins, because it's the reprogramming, the brain rewiring, the reformatting old stories that actually don't serve how you want to be in the world. And that's, for me, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's a lot of fun for the client too, to release that trauma. So they say typically people store stress in their back. That's why most people have back pain, right? So, the traditional medical community has now linked, the connection between the mind and the body, and that the body is now, for example, with the example of stress, most people store it in their back. And if you look at the way we use our language too, how we say things. You're a pain in my bleep, we can manifest where we direct our stress in our body as well, or especially anxiety. Anxiety typically shows up in body aches and body joints aching, the body starts to ache through the joints and stuff like that, are really popular forms of where chronic stress is stored in the body that most people deal with. And especially as they get older, because it's just that buildup, as we get older, the body wears down, especially if you're not releasing stress and anxiety in healthy ways on a regular basis. You're not, implementing a wellness routine to release it, in healthy ways. Most people will come home from work and have a glass of wine. That one glass may turn into 2 or 3, or they indulge in a comfort food combined with the glass of wine. They vent out their frustrations, and then they amplify that anger energy. It gets amplified through the power of our word. And they don't actually process their stress and, why it's affecting them so much, the triggers and stuff like that. So once the client releases that, trauma, what is the end result after they release the trauma from the body?
I love that question. What we will see is that the traumas get released. There seem to be, so here's the thing. When we release trauma, there are so many different layers to that piece of the puzzle. And so just when we release one level of it and we release something about it, when we are continuing on our just like human journey and we are, maybe confronted with something that may activate that trauma again, but in a different way, in a different level, that's where it's, required for continual support to really move through that. And the universe is beautiful at providing those opportunities. That is what I've seen in my clients, is that when they are really anchoring into, okay, we are working on this big concept, we are going to go through it, we're going to get to it, we're just going to keep clearing it out. The universe always provides incredible opportunities for continued exploration, to excavate, to clear, and to be able to move through. And this is where emotional resilience really comes from, is because as this surfaces, knowing what tools to use for you that will make a big difference so that it doesn't stop you in your tracks, so that you can continue to keep moving forward with confidence from a regulated place, not from a place of like fear or even like fear of like having pain or fear of having anxiety. Now, what I notice in the clients that I work with, it's phenomenal because now they see anything that is coming up as an opportunity to heal something deeper. So whereas previously, maybe it surfaced and created that high cortisol, the, running away from your body, going into fight or flight, maybe going into shutdown, overindulgence, like you mentioned before. Now they see it as, okay, what is coming up? What can I do? How can I name it, label it, move through it so that it doesn't keep snowballing? Because, and that snowball is where, sure, one glass of wine may turn into 2 or 3, and then there's a breakdown of communication. Your body doesn't feel great. That's the snowball effect. Whereas what if you work through it and then you have that glass of wine and you're not using the wine to cope or be a Band-Aid? So that's how really just like releasing trauma looks like in reality.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So you can basically have more emotional freedom.
Yes.
You're not locked into the anchor of that negative emotion. And your body won't be addicted to that negative emotion either, so that you're going to search for ways to recreate that negative emotion by searching for something to complain about, or maybe triggering somebody so that they can start a fight, so you can feel that emotion. Because our body gets addicted to emotions that we feel on a regular basis. So, okay, so they release it, and would you say that can break depending upon how long they've been living with it, they can break that negative emotional addiction, or do they have to kind of get refamiliar with another emotion to kind of get addicted to, like more so positive emotions?
So I love it. That's almost like a two-part question. So one thing that you're referring to is the releasing what is getting in the way. Yes, completely. Energy work, breath work, movement. Like that's why all these tools matter, because you can release it and then you feel more empowered and confident as you're moving through challenges that may surface. So your lens, your perspective starts to shift when things, because that is the human experience. Like we are going to get challenged. And in different types of like energy healings, I do a lot of cord cutting. There's a lot of energy work. We can break these cords, any oaths or ties to any previous conceived limiting belief or notion. And sometimes we have to do that on a regular basis for a specific amount of time in order to really clean and clear it up, right? The other part of your question is very much about anchoring into the celebration, which is critical because we have to have both sides of the coin. It's not just about like, the nitty gritty of clearing out, but it is the anchoring into the positive, into and reformatting your operating system, how you process your neural pathways in your brain, creating those superhighways for appreciation, for the gratitude, for seeing potentially previously perspectives that may have brought you down as an opportunity now. Like that's a completely shift. Like it's a completely different shift. And I was actually, I have a variety of different programs. Some are for adults, some are for families, some are for kids. And in my superpower program for kids, I had a session earlier today with a teenager, and she said it beautifully because it's like her learning to disconnect from people's stories that may have previously triggered her not being good enough or comparing herself to others. And now showing up from a place of, well, it really actually has nothing to do with me. That's empowerment. That is believing and operating from the world, the universe, providing for your highest good. When we come from this perspective, this lens, we create more of that. And so it's balancing the two while then focusing more on the celebrations. And this is, with the whole psychology bias, the negativity bias in psychology, in your brain, it's important to anchor into those, the love, the joy, the happiness, the gratitude, the appreciation, the compassion, the non-judgment, so that people learn those neural pathways. And that's more of the default operating system. So it's very much about shifting operating systems. And it is remarkable to watch people navigate this journey in a much quicker time, because when I work with clients, it is day-to-day access. And it's usually in that day-to-day access where people need the most support. It's not just like once a week. And so being able to support people in those moments that used to maybe trigger them to go into other cycles, that is where the beauty and the magic happens. And that's how brain rewiring happens so much quicker than it used to.
Love that. Love that. And I love that you brought up the teenager that you worked with. I'm finding, I'm quite impressed with the young teens. Actually, I was on a podcast with a podcast host that was 16 years old, and she had a personal development podcast. And I actually was able to have a pretty in-depth conversation with her. She was well-versed, pretty well-versed in personal development considering her age. I was quite impressed. So there seems to be a trend with the teenagers that are actually really seeking out this knowledge and looking to think in healthier ways to manage their emotions. And they're taking it seriously. And the fact that, really understanding that whatever someone perceives you as or judges you as, or whatever it is, whatever negative energy is coming at you as a result of their lens, their perception, their experience in the world, it has nothing to do with you. It's all about them.
Right.
So it doesn't happen. That does not happen. Like it just does not happen. Like, oh, okay, got that. So I'm going to work today and my coworker says this and I'm like cool as a cucumber because I know what it's about. It doesn't happen like that. It's like you have to really process that because you will respond and you may even react, even though you just learned that knowledge, because you have to really kind of ingrain it into your system, like really understand it. And that kind of takes a few trials of life experience, and really anchoring in, like really, really immersing yourself into the knowledge, like listening to this podcast, reading books about personal development, going to events, because it does not happen, with one event or one book or one podcast episode. It's literally listening to it over and over again, hearing, because then your brain starts to say, okay, this is, you're hearing more evidence and evidence of it to kind of showcase like, oh, this must, okay, there's something to this. And then when you go to the real world and experience it, you gather more evidence and then you start to like really believe it to kind of indoctrinate yourself. Because we've been indoctrinated by society for all our lives without this knowledge. So we just react based on our monkey mind, this impulsive mind of emotional reaction, because we were never taught how to self-regulate our emotions and we weren't taught psychology and the truth of the reality of our lens and stuff, right? So that's why it just takes time. It takes an immersion process. So that's why I'm really impressed with the young teenagers that are really kind of gravitating to it. And, because it took me a long time. Even when I was a teenager, I dabbled with a few books, but I didn't really fully get immersed until, I don't know, like late 20s, early 30s. So, but it was a journey to kind of constantly go into the real world with that knowledge and to kind of really process and integrate and have that as my new doctrination of being. So just wanted to say that to the audience because I hear, people are always, personal development sometimes gets a bad rap, because the people go to an event, they don't change, and then people just think it's hooey and, but it's, it doesn't happen in one day.
No, and I really appreciate what you talk about with that full immersion, because that's exactly, when I coming from the healthcare model, it's very much like try this, go home, see how it works, right? It's almost like that personal development world where it's like you go to an event, you read a book, you do this, you do that, you try to put it all together, and then you're like, okay, I'm not exactly where I want to be, or I don't feel the way I wanted to feel, or I'm not creating in the way that I hoped I would. And that's where no matter the program that people enroll with me, I have a library of resources that cover exactly what you're referring to. It's just like it's a library of teaching people what happens to your brain with big feelings, what happens to your nervous system, how can you turn that ship around in the moment. Here are tangible next steps for you to be able to do that. Here are audios and meditations to listen to about that emotional resiliency, so that when you are going out navigating the world, if you are listening to something that is like, you are amazing, and it's, reminding your brain to start shifting into a perspective of resiliency and getting back up and looking for the shortcut that is created if you keep looking in that direction. And so this multidimensional toolbox is what is required, in my opinion, for that whole body healing, for the embodiment that you're talking about, so that people don't have to just go to, one thing here, one thing there, and try to implement that on their own. And so, I look at it from the neuroscience, from the nutritional psychiatry component, from the movement, and how to embody that in your body to help remove the trauma while going through daily detoxification, because that is what sets people up for success, for true healing, and then expansion.
I love that. I totally agree. That's awesome. So where can people go to learn more about you and ways to work with you? What's your website, Instagram?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So my website is holisticmedicalhealing.com. And you can always contact me with the contact button there. And I have a variety of programs. You can find me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. On Instagram, the handle is holistic.medical.healing. And you can always just reach out and see which of my programs would be a good fit. Sometimes that is a great way to navigate, unless, for example, you have children, and then I only have one program for that. So there's a variety of different ways, and I'm continuing to evolve as working with clients also evolves into what is going to help people really be their most embodied self, targeting the mind, the body, and the spirit.
Awesome. I love that. I love that you're offering it to children as well. I mean, that's where it really needs to start. I mean, this should have been taught in school, but we have to, do it ourselves and seek out people like you to work with. And I love the fact that there's a children's program, so that they're all our children. They're going to grow up and they're going to be running society one day. So it really truly does need to start at a young level. So thank you so much. And also too, when you go on her website, I think you have like some kind of free downloadable food guide.
Yeah, actually, there's a few different free resources. I have at the very bottom of my website, it is the body image upgrade. It is a actual like body image workshop of like mirror work, a bunch of different modalities. Really nice. I also have a nutrition guide for mental health. And very soon I will have a brain optimization toolkit, which will include movement medicine, breathwork, energy work, and the nutrition guide for mental health.
Awesome. I love that. So guys, check out her website, holisticmedicalhealing.com. And the link will be in the show notes. So thank you so much, Dahlia. I was going to say Delilah.
You did it. No, it was perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. And everybody else, remember to be happy being well. And if this is your first time listening, subscribe so you don't miss another episode of Happy Being Well.
If you learned something new or were inspired to live happy being well, please be sure to subscribe to the Happy Being Well podcast so you don't miss an upcoming episode. Also, please feel free to leave a 5-star review, including what you learned or what inspired you in today's episode. This podcast is presented by HappyBeingWell.com, your online store for natural wellness products, so you can live happy being well. Order your next all-natural essential oil, all-natural face mask, all-natural bath soap, all-natural deodorant, herbal tea, crystals including crystal home decor and kitchen items, irresistible leggings, and much more at HappyBeingWell.com. Free shipping on all orders within the USA.